Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Wednesday evening conversation, question and answers with Clear Mountain Monastery community. It's nice to see people tuning in. This evening we'll continue a grouping of dhammas, commentary and thoughts about another grouping of dharmas. We just last week finished our list of 7 types of intelligence from the Dhammañu Sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya. And this week we'll begin an explanation of a discourse which we had started earlier in the summer, and that is the Majjhima Nikaya number 37, the Maha Asapura Sutta. Majjhima Nikaya number 39. The focus for tonight's discussion will be purification of livelihood. And I thought it would be nice, since livelihood can be a rather complicating thing for many people. It's a part of one's life, a huge part of everyone's life really, which maybe doesn't always fully align with one's other spiritual goals. So everyone tuning into this channel, everyone tuning into these talks has some further goal in their life, some higher goal, some higher aspiration. Sometimes our livelihood, what we do to just get by, what we do to make a living, is not always necessarily 100%, and even often much less than anywhere near 100% in line with these higher goals. So that'll be the topic for our discussion this evening. But to start with, I thought we'd just sit in meditation for 5 or 10 minutes, probably closer to 5 minutes, and focusing on loving kindness meditation. So I'll just give a few words on loving kindness meditation, guided meditation. So people can come to a place of stillness wherever you are. If you are able to sit, then you can take an upright and relaxed position. And try to bring your awareness to your heart. The physical heart, right in the middle of the chest. And loving kindness is all about this wish. May there be happiness. May there be happiness and ease, freedom from suffering. And for this practice of loving kindness meditation, I thought we could actually just start with ourselves, which sometimes doesn't happen. So giving the thought, may I be happy. May I really be happy. This is why I'm here. This is why I'm studying the sutras. This is why I come to the Dhamma. I want to be happy. And this isn't selfish. The happier I am, then the less suffering I inflict upon myself, and then the less suffering and affliction I externalize upon other people around me. May I be happy. And if there's any conflictedness, any second thoughts, second guessing yourself, what is happiness? Do I really deserve happiness? Just come back to the feeling in the heart. And we're really just cultivating warmth and friendliness to ourselves. no matter what my excuse-generating mind can come up with, no matter how bad I can find reasons for saying I am, may I be happy. That stuff right now, it doesn't matter. There's a beautiful term, the music of metta, the music of loving kindness. And really just give yourself whatever kind of music you need. Yeah. May I be happy. And just letting that wish, letting this vibration just shake off the scales and the crispy flakiness of any rigid or ungenerous thoughts towards ourselves, which might be more inclined to find fault than to appreciate ourselves. May I be happy. Again, metta it's a feeling. It's a feeling that you can learn to generate in the heart, and you can connect it, you can yoke it to the breath. May I be happy on the in-breath. May I be at ease on the out-breath. Or whatever you find most conducive. But really, you don't have to connect it to the breath or anything else. Just this warmth, this inner warmth and friendliness. You can have words or no words. You need to just figure out the exact type of music, which is what you need right now, what is most kind to you right now, the music of metta. And if you can't do it, there's no metta for yourself, just totally dry, this deep aversion, then the music of metta can encompass that as well. This breath and expansiveness, this expansive mind can totally subsume even that, even this seemingly utterly deep conflictedness about this practice. The boundlessness of metta can consume all of that, can contain all of that. It's bigger than all of that. So we can open our eyes if you've been meditating with eyes closed or in a more formal meditative mode, and we can transition into our discussion this evening. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So our schedule will be to discuss this discourse for the next 20 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to questions and answers. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the YouTube or the Facebook question box there. And hopefully you can get around to addressing people's thoughts, because this is this aspect of livelihood really is one which is hard to talk about in general terms. Livelihood is so specific, and even if the Buddha had been, spoken very, very specifically about livelihood, mentioning, long lists of all the livelihoods and all the ways of making a living that people can have, and listing out which ones were right and which ones were wrong, which he didn't. And we'll go into maybe why that is. Really this matter of how we can exist, how we make the money to support our practice of Dhamma, and support the people who depend on us, and support ourselves. This is a very specific issue. So hopefully people will feel comfortable to ask specific questions, and we'll have 15 minutes for that. And then after this YouTube period at 6:45, we'll switch over to Zoom. And you can find a Zoom link at Clear Mountain Monastery on the calendar page, and that'll be a more interactive discussion where we can actually hear one another rather than just seeing what you write. So I'll give a little bit of context for this discourse on the Maha Asapura Sutta, the Greater Discourse at Asapura. So in this teaching, the Buddha is always talking to monks, as he often is, or as it's often recorded, and he gives a series of 10 or 12 what can be thought of as affirmations or mental labels, some thoughts which you can actively use. Almost, they're literally phrases which you can use to channel your energy and channel your direction in life. So these start with conscience and what's called fear of wrongdoing. So hiri and ottappa, this is the basis of this gradual path that the Buddha lays out in this discourse. And the Buddha often talks about the gradual path, but it's in this discourse where he most specifically details all these different steps along the path. And it's not necessarily the case that you finish purifying one step and then you jump to the next. But they really do mutually support each other. But things really are going in a more and more subtle direction. So the first training is I will be endowed with conscience and a fear of wrongdoing. So this is the basis for morality, and genuinely having this wish to do this. The next trainings are I will be pure in bodily conduct, I will be pure in verbal conduct, I will be pure in mental conduct. And then on to the fifth training, which is purity of livelihood. If people wanted to go back and see those earlier talks, I believe we now have a YouTube playlist where you can just go to the gradual teachings and listen to those earlier talks from earlier in the summer. After purity of livelihood, just to give you a bit of a sneak peek, there are no spoilers here because there's nothing to be spoiled. It's just good to know the more and more specific direction that we're headed. So after purity of livelihood, or coming after in the discourse, is sense restraint. I'll be endowed with sense restraint, moderation in eating, devotion to wakefulness. I'll be possessed of mindfulness and clear comprehension. I'll abandon the hindrances, develop the jhanas, and practice insight meditation, vipassana. Exciting word, seeing things clearly. But tonight, yes, purity of livelihood. I'll read out the specific affirmation which is in this discourse. So, what's more to be done, bhikkhus? This means monks, but you can just think of it as practitioners. Practitioners, You should train thus. Our livelihood shall be purified, clear and open, flawless and restrained, and we will not laud ourselves and disparage others on account of that pure livelihood. For people who've read this discourse before, you'll notice that this phrasing that something will be purified, clear and open, flawless and restrained. This is used for the purity of bodily action, purity of verbal action, and purity of mental action, which preceded this next step of purity of livelihood. And it can be interesting to ask oneself what each of these terms might mean for your own livelihood. The first term, parisuddho no ajivo, our livelihood will be pure, vivacity. The verb here is a future tense verb. So many people sometimes come to Buddhism and get ideas from who knows where, but have this thought that there's no place for thinking in Buddhism, one, and there's no place for the future or the past in Buddhism. Buddhism is all about non-thinking in the present moment, and while the present moment certainly is our ground for practice, as we can see in this discourse, and many others, not just people practicing to attain enlightenment, but the Buddha himself, would talk and think about the future or talk and think about the past. And here he's actually actively encouraging us to do likewise, to reflect, our livelihood will be purified. So this is a teaching which you don't just do once. It's not like you sit down, okay, I'm going to spend half an hour this weekend and figure out my livelihood. While it can be super useful, very, very useful to take time, give yourself space to get perspective and to get different angle on things, because if you're just caught up in the day-to-day grind, then it's really hard to see anything past that and to actually even look deeper into what does what I'm doing, does this grind that I'm in, have put myself in, if you've had the luxury of choosing where you work and how you work, which many people in America do have that luxury, then questioning, does it really align with my higher ideals? And how does it align with my higher ideals? And you can do a lot. You don't need to be, frontline healthcare worker. You don't need to be in the fields doing, the most romantic form of service to the world for it to be right livelihood. It can really be a perspective that you take how you approach your livelihood. The Buddha did say some things about what livelihoods, what forms of occupation, what jobs are inappropriate, or for one who's trying to cultivate this path because they involve harm. And I'll give that list in a moment. But a lot of it can just be, how are we relating to the job that we have? Most people's jobs are somewhat mundane, and that doesn't have to be a bad thing. If you approach your job as a bus driver, approach your job, doing garden work, approach your job, whatever it is, however boring it might be at times, but reflect on it and try to use it well. So it's useful to look at what the Buddha said in terms of wrong livelihood. So for lay people, the Buddha didn't say much. In the Anguttara 5s, verse number 177, sutra number 177, the Buddha gave this advice of 5 types of wrong or inappropriate business. So a lay follower should not engage in 5 types of business. What 5? 1, a lay follower shouldn't engage in the business of weapons. They should not engage in the business of human beings. They should not engage in the business of meat, dealing in meat. Should not engage in the business of intoxicants, and shouldn't trade in poisons. So these are the negative end of the livelihood spectrum, that if you're working in a job that is mixed up with these unhelpful, harmful professions, then you might, and it would be good to shift professions. But this does get a little bit hairy. It's not always clear cut, black and white. If you're a restaurateur, or if you're working at a restaurant, that sells alcohol, sells beer, are you engaged in wrong livelihood if you are bringing alcohol to people? And this is it's a good question, and there are other things you might want to look at, like how open is the job market? Can you get another job? Many things to consider. This list again, so engaging in business of weapons. So I imagine most people who are tuning into this channel are not huge weapon dealers or engaged in large-scale selling of weapons. So that's something to be proud of. The second thing is the business of human beings. So this is human trafficking, slave trade, sex trafficking, and you don't want to support this in any way as well. The third is dealing in meat. So this would certainly cover someone who's actually a butcher, or if part of your livelihood does involve killing animals. Again, this is not just, this meat here specifically is referring to animal meat. The previous one was humans. So here we're looking at dealing in meat. So being a butcher is an unfortunate livelihood, which, if you yourself are engaged in it, then, and you have a choice of something else, it's probably a good idea to explore these other options. But again, you want to look at secondary effects if you can. Are you supporting the meat industry? Are you supporting sex trade industry? These are tertiary considerations which perhaps are best not totally mixed up with right livelihood. Right livelihood is really about what you yourself are engaged in, and these other secondary thoughts of how you might be supporting the industry are another level of refinement, which is certainly good to do. But here we're really just focusing on the specifics of our own profession. The next business, which we should try to avoid, is dealing in intoxicants, and that's specifically referring to alcohol. But as many people know, intoxicants, there are many things which can intoxicate the mind, so avoiding industries which deal in that, and then dealing in poisons. So that is, in a certain way, I mean, the Buddha did say a lot for monks. Like, there are lots of things which are wrong livelihood for a monk. If a monk is doing fortune telling or divination, or even certain types of medical treatment, that's considered wrong livelihood for a monk. But for lay people, you've really just got this negative, this low bar, and above that, the Buddha kind of puts the onus on each of us to figure out the extent to which our profession is yeah, supporting or hindering our growth in the teachings. So this is a training. Again, we can use this this affirmation, which the Buddha says himself: "Our livelihood shall be purified, clear and open, flawless and restrained, and we will not exalt ourselves nor disparage others on account of this purification of livelihood. Thus, you should train yourselves." This can be something which you bring up again and again. You could say it to yourself every morning. Because really, for most people who have a rather mundane job, you're not killing and stealing and dealing in weapons and human trafficking, etc. But yeah, you just got a normal job working in an office. But how can you purify that job? And really, purification in a Buddhist sense is on the mental level. So our livelihood shall be purified, clear and open, flawless and restrained. So if you do have a job which is, it's great if people can have a profession which is directly helping people. So I have just kind of created a list to counteract that list of 5 scary professions which people want to, stay away from. There's maybe 5 different spheres of occupation, which the Buddha didn't give this list, but it's just a list which, does give some guidance on thinking about this matter. So you have service in healing professions, medical professions, psychiatrists, psychologists, any medical doctor, any nurses, any people working in the healthcare industry, pharmacists, etc., naturopaths, all these things. So this is service in the form of health and healing. You have service in the form of teaching. So this is teaching in a formal way: elementary, high school, university, graduate school, etc. And or just the informal teachings that you do in other respects, if your livelihood is bound up with that, in person or online. The third sphere is, in terms of thinking of productive livelihoods, are service in produce. So working on a farm, working in a garden, working at a grocery store. This type of livelihood. This is on the positive end of the spectrum. Service in transport, bringing, taking the food from farm to grocer, etc. Bringing all the goods from one place to another. And service in human rights. So these are people who work as advocates and people who are designing policy to affect change on the positive end. So those are jobs, those are occupational fields which you really do have a lot of chance to not only not create any harm, but actually do a lot of good, which is a great thing. If you have the choice and the opportunity to be in such a profession, that's great. But it's not always possible, and it might not, actually you might just want a much simpler job. That might, a much simpler job, even if you're not actively, saving people's lives. You're, say, working in a factory, moving things from one place to another. Such a simple job, a job which doesn't necessarily entail a lot of thinking and decision-making, can actually be quite supportive for meditation. I had a friend who was considering ordaining, and he had some debt, so had to go back and pay off his own debt and support a family member. And he was really trying to weigh in his mind, do I go and get a job as a teacher? I think he was qualified to do that, where he would be engaged in mental work all the time, which can be supportive for growth in Dhamma, but can also just lead to a lot of proliferation? Or should he just go and work in this factory, which he had worked at before, and actually was just a much simpler profession? He didn't have to think so much, and therefore could actually give more attention to his meditation object. He had a lot of time relatively by himself. And for some people, where they're at in their meditation practice, in their life, then that might be something you want to pursue. It's just a simpler profession, just to get enough money to support yourself and your dependents. And so it's really not a clear-cut answer. But I think it is worthwhile to repeatedly ask oneself this question, like, how can I purify my livelihood? Make it clear, open, flawless, and restrained. What do these things even mean? And to do this on a regular basis, even if you do it twice a day, before you go to work and at lunchtime, it can really, shift your mind state. And really that's what Buddhism is all about. That's what the training of the mind is all about, is shifting how we see things, shifting how we're aware. And those are just a few thoughts for this evening's Dharma Talk. And we can now open it up to questions. If anybody has any personal reflections about livelihood or any other considerations on this topic or other ones. Yeah, it's good to keep in mind that all of these, what I've kind of referred to as affirmations or aspirations, are framed by the Buddha in terms of trainings. So all of these trainings, I will be someone who's endowed with conscience and fear of wrongdoing. I'll be someone who is possessed of our verbal conduct shall be purified, etc. Thus you should train yourself. You should train yourself thus. Evan hibo, sikita bang. Thus you should train yourself. Sikita bang. This is something which, like any form of training, job training, skill acquisition, comes through time, comes with practice, and comes with mistakes. And you learn from your mistakes, and you become more subtle, and you become more refined in what you're doing. This is how you cultivate and grow at any skill. And if no matter what our livelihood, if your livelihood, your occupation is good enough, gets you the money you need, still there's training to be done, like the purification of it through present moment awareness, present moment clarity, and awareness, throughout the day. I think this can be a really useful way to consider this training of purifying one's livelihood. My livelihood shall be purified. My livelihood shall be purified. And how do you do that? You do that in this present moment. As your coworker brings you more work, sends you more emails, you can just take a break. There are alarms you can set on your computer to ring you up every half hour or so. I know at Abhayagiri, the monastery where I ordained, there are a few computers in a communal space which people can use. And one monk who was had to be engaged in some computer work would set one of these alarms every hour to go off, and it was his mindfulness bell to come back and examine his own intentions and how he's relating to the work that he's doing. So that's something you can do. So here's a question. So how about a very wholesome job in which you're surrounded by coworkers who are breaking the majority of precepts, and the pressure is high to hang out with them or do the same? Great question. Yeah, I think it's really worthwhile to examine this notion of being generous with your time. Yeah, this is something which you hear in meditation circles. Be generous with your time, and it's certainly a nice thing to do if you've got time to be generous with, and if it's helping you grow in good qualities. But if Tanisabo and I had a conversation about this. You can check that out in one of our previous YouTube videos. But just really examining, like, what, do I really have to, like, engage with these people, and to what extent? And yeah, I mean, there are a number of things you can do. You can look at their positive sides, which certainly they might have, or you can just ignore them to the extent that you can. I mean, how high is the pressure? Can you be extremely friendly, but yeah, just not say much? Just be someone who is a very friendly person, but just doesn't engage. You can, and I think that's a really useful skill to learn. So I think this I think is a good piece of advice, is to grow in the skill of having lots of metta, so much goodwill for your coworkers, or someone, specifically in this context, somebody you don't want to engage with for whatever reason, especially if they're not so high on the morality spectrum. But yeah, lots of metta for this person, but just not engaging. They say hello, you say hello, great to see you, but you just don't, there's no hooks. You don't let yourself be hooked, and they're having a meal together and you say, oh no, thank you guys so much, and really mean it. It's, even if someone's not keeping precepts, you don't want to be around them for whatever reason. Yeah, you can still have metta for these people and genuinely mean it. Thank you so much. It's really nice that you would invite me, but no, I actually, have something else I need to be doing. Or, yeah, so hopefully you can figure out some way to do that. Useful. That also is a training, sikha. Next question. Namaste. I feel cooking, talking, care of the house, the cat, etc. for my family is a low-grade occupation, because even a servant maid can do that. I am not respected for what I am doing. Interesting. Yeah. While being respected by other people's is certainly nice, you can't really control the perceptions of others. I think, and certainly you could find people who would respect you, for doing this thing, especially if you're cooking and doing these things to help other people. But even if you're just looking after yourself and looking after your cat, I mean, who else is going to do that? It's your cat. So, yeah, the question of whether other people respect you or not is bound up with who those people are and what their discernment and sensibilities are. But I think maybe a more important question is, do you respect yourself for it? And if not, then yeah, you have a couple of options. One, you could try to find another occupation which you respect yourself more for, or you could just shift your perception, like, how is this disreputable? You're not hurting anybody. You're looking after your cat. Yeah, but yeah, these things are so hard to judge. Would someone fault a mother, say a stay-at-home mother, a stay-at-home father, for looking after their kids? Some people might consider that a low-grade occupation. But kids got to get reared, cats got to live. So yeah, I'll be curious if you have any follow-up thoughts. Okay, here's a question. So I have a perfect, quote, livelihood. I'm retired and take care of my 4-year-old granddaughter while her parents, both nurses, work. Yes, that is an awesome livelihood. And it does, you're framing it in this way, does kind of raise this question. You know, there's no word for retirement in Buddhism. Yeah, you've got this idea in Hinduism, in certain Hindu texts, of these different yama, these different stages of life. And eventually, you know, when one becomes older, according to the system, one like retires in a sense and then goes and practices meditation in a forest. But in a Buddhist context, certainly for a Buddhist monk, I mean, there's, you know, although we do have abbots who are quote unquote retiring, but we still have to keep all the rules. And, you know, as lay people, you know, if you're wanting to progress on the path, I mean, you're still wanting to keep the 5 precepts. But yeah, how do you spend your time? This is a huge part of livelihood, actually. Yeah, perhaps more specific than the actualities of how and what you're doing, you know, during, you know, 7 hours of your day, 5 days a week. It's how are you spending that time? I think that's a more productive way of conceiving of livelihood. And yeah, your livelihood sounds great, and you must have put forth a lot of good conditions to be in that place now. Next question, can you share some reflections on balancing our efforts towards our livelihood versus our efforts towards the practice? Yeah. So a good question, which I've asked myself at crucial moments of change, say moving from one place to another, is 10 years from now, what would I regret doing too much of at this point in my life? And what would I regret doing too little of at this point in my life? And if you really ask yourself that question deeply, then you might get an answer for this. Yeah, what is that balance? Especially if your livelihood is perhaps going in a direction away from your practice. And again, you have to measure this for yourself. And practice with a capital P is great. So I've never seen practice with a capital P before, but I really like it. But it makes me ask, what is practice with a lowercase p? And I think both of these are useful to consider. Just immediately thinking practice with a capital P is formal practice, doing formal sitting meditation, eyes closed, lotus posture, something like that, walking meditation from here to there, very specific. That's capital P practice, very focused, conducive to concentration, but there's also lowercase p practice of just being here right now. And that's also extremely important. What does the symbol on Clear Mountain mean? So this is we're actually creating a new logo. We've got one in the works. But this current one that you see now is what's called an anulom, which I'm not actually sure of the origins of it, but I think it just has connotations of mindfulness and yeah, going from bigger to more and more refined and going upwards and upwards. So, but I've heard it described in many ways, and it's actually just, you know, many people in Thailand use it as a protective tattoo, a yantra. So there's probably not one specific meaning for it. Great comment. So mothers are the carers of humanity. Yes, it's up to us to raise the next generation of carers. We have the most important occupation, metta to all, and the symbol. That's great. Yes, I love it. Capital THE, the most important occupation. All right. Well, on that, we can just leave it at that, because it's a very nice sentiment, and I say that to my mother often. But it's great if we can make, our livelihood the most important livelihood, because in a sense, whatever we are doing is the most important thing for us, because we have to do it a lot. And it takes up a lot of our time. So give attention to it, and give thought to it, and see what happens if you reflect on this. Our livelihoods, my livelihood, will be purified, clear and open, flawless and restrained. If you say that to yourself, if you incline your mind in that direction every day, what's going to happen? All right. Great to see everybody, and have a good week. And we'll be back again next week. Tanisabo and myself will be doing a conversation, and you can tune in for that. Same time, 6 p.m. And for people who are live in Seattle, 9:30 at St. Mark's Cathedral, Tanisabo will be giving a live teaching. So take care, everybody. Have a good week.